Don't call her cute, don't call her feisty. She's a rebel, she is nasty, she is brave. She isn't honey, sweetie, sugar pie, baby. And don't you ever say that she was well behaved. Don't you ever say that she was well behaved. And don't you ever say that she was well behaved.
Okay.
I gave Liz, we had 2 vacuum cleaners. Because when I moved in with Shaki, we had the exact same vacuum cleaner.
Why did you have a vacuum cleaner? Wait, are we recording already?
Yeah.
Good.
We've been just like checking the levels.
Good. Why do you have a vacuum cleaner when you were staying with your cousin?
No. I had it when I lived it for a year with Jake and them.
Right. Oh, I forgot that hop over.
Yeah. So she was talking about needing a vacuum cleaner, and I was like, we have 2 and we need more closet space. And I think like I was hesitant to get rid of it at first because I was like, well, what if like this doesn't work out where we're living together and then I just don't have a vacuum cleaner anymore or like any of that stuff. But now it's like, all right, I think this is
that's so crazy.
But so I just gave it to
wow, that's a big step in your relationship, getting rid of the second vacuum cleaner.
It is a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
So
congratulations.
Thank you so much. So I gave it to Liz, and she's like trying to figure out where things are on the vacuum cleaner. And so she was texting me, like, where's the plug? And like, where's this? And
vacuum cleaner. Is it a rug one or a floor or a wood floor one?
It does anything.
Ooh,
it does anything you need, and it has all the.
Jealous of Liz. I should have snagged that up.
Yeah.
I want to get a Roomba.
Ooh, yeah, Roombas are so nice. It'd be nice.
It would be nice to get a Roomba,
especially in this apartment.
I'm so lazy. I don't want to. Yeah, in this apartment, I think it would do well. I don't really understand how it works. I guess you have to make sure there's like nothing. You have to clear. We'd have to clear some shit off the ground. I think.
Sort of, but I think it also like avoids it. It knows.
Has a sensor.
It has those sensors.
But then it's like, I know it like bumps into furniture and shit. But like, we have like things we need to hang up. I just feel like there's like paper things that might like get. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Worried. I need to like sort of clear the grounds a little bit, but otherwise, it'd be pretty awesome. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
we're doing it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Welcome to Well Behaved.
I'm probably gonna keep all that other stuff in.
Okay. Just some good
Just
vacuum
talk.
Some lady talk.
This is Well Behaved. I'm Molly Ruben-Long.
I'm Ariel Elias.
And this is a podcast about women in history who maybe you didn't know about before.
Have you ever wanted to hear 2 grown women give you a C+ book report about women in history? Well,
no, this is for sure like a B. A solid B.
A solid B?
I would say. Yeah.
I guess it depends on the teacher.
Yeah.
It depends on what the curve is.
Yeah, that's true. I think it would be good. But yeah. How are you doing? You went to a very casual wedding yesterday.
It was so casual and nice and just like, because they didn't do a ceremony. They just went to City Hall and got married and then had an open bar and ordered pizza. And that's
to an actual bar.
To
not
an
even
actual
like an
bar.
Open bar at like a hall.
No, to an actual bar in my neighborhood, and they like it's the kind of bar that doesn't have a sign out front because it's like, yeah, I mean, if you meant to be here, you'll be here, which is nice. It's like, did you ever go to Snake and Jake's in New Orleans?
I think maybe once.
It's this bar. If you've never,
it's the one on the they have the second floor, right?
No, it's just one floor. If you've never been there, it's this bar. It's so unassuming. They say that if you are sober enough to find it, you're not drunk enough to be there. And it's like, it really is, there's no sign. The only way you can really tell is there are Christmas lights on the outside, which makes it really hard to find in the winter because everywhere has Christmas lights. And it's just like, you go in and it's the diviest of dive bars. And I think they raised the prices a little bit, but when I was in college, you could get a Schlitz tall boy for like $1.
That's awesome.
And then there were no windows, so we'd be in there and then we'd leave and be like, oh, it's 10 a.m. Oh, the sun is out.
Your computer.
Ooh, I got it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
That's really crazy. Ugh. Yeah, I don't think I ever went there, but I definitely went to other places where I stayed out to the ends of the night in New Orleans. Everyone says New York is a city that never sleeps, but this town is sleepy as hell compared to New Orleans.
There's a last call here. It's 4 a.m. That's not
right.
Never sleeping.
Right. So you go to sleep at 5 and you get home?
Yeah. No, thank you.
It's very reasonable.
New Orleans, it closes when you leave.
It does, yeah. Or whenever the bartender wants it to.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's the best.
Oh,
How are you?
I'm good. I have a little cold, a little head cold.
Baby.
So that's not fun. But otherwise, I'm pretty good. Spent the night at my parents' house last night because there was a
Fiesta.
there was a very loud fiesta outside my block. All of a sudden on Friday, there were just like photocopied signs, photocopied pieces of paper hung up all along the block that just said like, no parking, you will be towed. But it was like handwritten. It was like, I don't think this is official. And then, but maybe it was because everyone cleared their cars, and then like somehow there were police barricades. It seemed like someone just like called their uncle and got them. Like they didn't. It was very weird. But then like there was just like 15 people outside with the loudest speaker I've ever heard. Like the music in our apartment felt like it was coming from inside the house. Like it was like so loud, and I was like, I can't be here right now, so I went to my parents' house. Yeah,
need your rest.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. How about
my dad has a cold right now, and my mom just broke her toe.
Oh God,
I know.
My parents are at the Jersey Shore.
Ooh,
I know. We used to go there every summer for a weekend, and I wanted to go with them. I kind of wish I did, but I don't know. Louis is about to leave for 2 months, so we're trying to not be apart, which I understand, which I'm happy about. But it was like, I wish they went a different weekend.
We used to go to New Jersey every winter.
Mm.
We never, I think there was
never
one
went to
time.
the Jersey Shore?
I think one time we went to the Jersey Shore in the summer.
It's really fun.
And that was it. And every
It's
other
pretty
time we
awesome.
were just in New Jersey, in the woods, in the winter. And my
Well.
parents were like, this is your vacation.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, we didn't take good vacations growing up.
Really?
Yeah, we just went to New Jersey.
Yeah, that's hard when you
That's it.
when you have family, like you have to see them. That's really takes up the vacation time. It's nice that my family was all pretty close. Oh, we've talked about this though, because you also had family in California, right? You never went there.
Right. And we didn't do that. I did a show this weekend, and there was a kid. There was like a 12-year-old boy in the audience with. I thought they were his parents. I found out later it was his aunt and uncle. But I was just like, and they were on vacation, and I was like, you need to know that you have the coolest parents for taking you here. Because when I was 12, we went to New Jersey, and we're in the woods in the winter.
Yeah.
So
That seems weird. Was
They
it
were
weird
cool.
to have a 12-year-old?
he was cool. He was
Okay.
he was like laughing at the right parts.
Okay.
He seemed with it.
Feels like, was there some like dirty stuff?
Of course. But like when you're 12, you know dirty stuff.
That's true, I guess.
You don't know like the nuances of it and how cool it can feel. But like
Yeah.
you know like what a boner is when you're 12.
That's true. And that's really all that comedy is.
That's most of it.
As long as you know what a boner is,
If
you
know what
are gonna get it.
you can hang. You're gonna be a good audience member.
That's great. Once I did this weird show in New Orleans. There was this like live access TV thing that they did that was like, it was like a reprisal of some show that like used to exist. I forget what it was called. It was like, how's it going, Nola, or some shit. And are you okay?
Yeah, I was just looking for my phone. I was being distracted, and
it's
I'm
right over
sorry.
there.
Yeah.
That's okay. You can look at it. But I did this like show, and it was like live, and there was like bands and stuff, and then I was the only comedian on it, and I got on stage and I realized that the family of the like guy who was like producing it was there, and there were like little kids in the audience, like little, but not like babies where they wouldn't understand,
Right.
like just the perfectly wrong age for comedy, like
Where they're
like
just gonna ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, like something like they were like little like kids in elementary school, and I was like, well, all I have is my jokes. I can't change this, so I just did them.
And you're like, just let me be your
like a
cautionary tale.
Yeah, it was tough. They were all right, but I was like, oh God, I got my free drink and got out of there.
Yeah. I remember in New Orleans once at one of the Mardi Gras parades, I forget which one, and I went with my professor and her husband, and they had like a bunch of other Tulane professor friends, and they had one of the friends had two kids they were like one was little. One was like 3 or 4, but the other one was 7. And it was one of the parades where they just like throw out a bunch of condoms and like that kind of stuff. And we were going through their bags afterwards because they were like looking for candy and like, you know, to see what they got. And I like found the condoms and I just like sort of like put my hand over it and like slowly slid it away.
Perfect.
And I was like, I'll just hold on to that for you. I'll just take that.
That's very awkward.
So they're like, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. Balloon? Colorful balloons?
Wet balloon.
Ugh. Gross.
Are you first? I think you were first, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So my lady this week is Katharine Drexel. She was born November 26th, 1858 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her dad was rich as hell. Her grandfather had been a successful investment banker. Like first he started this little investing firm in Kentucky and then made it big in Philadelphia. So Katharine's dad and uncle became apprentices and like learned the trade of investment banking. And her uncle would go on to found Drexel University and was also a co-founder of JP Morgan.
Oh.
With JP Morgan. So that's like this family. Her mom died right after she was born because 1858.
Yeah.
So Katharine had an older sister. They went to live with her aunt and uncle while her dad dealt with his own shit and was like mourning or whatever, and then got remarried to this woman named Emma Bouvier 2 years later. And Emma Bouvier was actually the great aunt of Jackie O, which is pretty cool. So like, yeah, they're like elite people, but they're cool. They're good elite people. Which in these times, it's nice to hear about one.
Yeah.
So Emma was cool as hell. She instilled in Katharine and her sisters a solid moral compass. She was very Catholic. And apparently Katharine and her older sister didn't realize Emma wasn't their real mom until much, much later, which is like very sweet and fucked up.
Yeah.
Right? Because like nobody talked to their kids back then. And so every family had a bathtub full of secrets.
Yeah.
Where it was just like, yeah, these things like you don't need to know.
Is that an expression, a bathtub full of secrets?
I wrote it.
It
is now. It sounds better than a closet.
But that's just like the expression that already exists.
But I'm putting my own little Elias twist on things.
I love it. A bathtub full of secrets. You heard it here first, folks. Print the t-shirts.
So Emma was super Catholic, but the good kind that talks the talk and walks the walk.
Right, but it's like also chill about pedophilia.
Yeah. I think they didn't know that yet in the 1850s.
Yeah.
They found that out in the 1950s, and then we found that out in the 1990s.
Right.
So the Drexel family would go around distributing clothes, food, and money to whoever needed it. They would also have like 2 or 3 times a week, they would just have these, I guess, sort of like town halls that they would hold where anybody from the community could come and tell them what they needed.
Cool.
They would even seek out families who were too proud or embarrassed to seek help, and they would do it really discreetly. So they like made, especially widows.
Yeah.
It said.
That's, yeah.
So they, you know,
great.
Good community members.
Yeah.
Katharine and her sister were mostly homeschooled, and then Emma began I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I'm not Catholic, catechism. Is that right?
That sounds right. I don't know.
Yeah,
What is that?
I think it's studying like the specific parts of Catholic religion.
Cool.
Because like Catholics have the Bible, but then they also have their other book that I can't. That maybe is the I don't know. I had one Catholic friend in high school.
I have no idea.
And she told me, but they have another.
I have a lot of
book.
Catholic relatives, but I don't know anything about it, really.
Email your corrections to wellbehavedpod@gmail.com or tweet at us at wellbehavedpod. Oh, also real quick, we have a Facebook page now. And I realized I haven't mentioned it on the podcast yet, but we have a Facebook page. It's Wellbehaved Podcast. So go and like that and review it.
Search in your Facebook bar.
If you want to, and we'll like post little like bonus photos and little recaps and stuff.
Some stuff.
So, okay. So Emma, the stepmom, began like a class for kids in the neighborhood about this Catholic study. And that's Katharine and her sisters were the teachers. Mm-hmm. So they were like out in the community or whatever. And there's a picture where you can see the class was integrated. And this was like 1870, which was super controversial because even though Pennsylvania was part of the Union, and we like to think of Philadelphia as this like very progressive city where Ben Franklin was from and stuff, the prevailing attitude was like they were fine with slavery. Like or at least they didn't think it was worth fighting over.
Right.
So like the fact that this was integrated and like all the kids got the same gifts from Emma, and they would always be really practical gifts, was like progressive or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in 1879, Emma got diagnosed with cancer. She died a few years later, and it was like super devastating for the family. Emma had kept meticulous records of all of their charity. So when Katharine and her sisters and her dad were going through all of her records, they discovered that Emma was paying the rent for 150 families.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's really sweet. Which we actually, when my grandfather died, and my mom and uncles and grandmother were going through his records, they found a bunch of like here and there, just like little donations throughout the years to all of these different charities that they didn't know he was doing.
It's like if I die right now, my family's going to go through my papers and realize that I'm not paying rent to anybody. So I get it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Really sweet. So Louis, if he died, they would see that he's paying
rent for both of us right now. Not for long. Don't get weird. It's not that expensive. Okay.
All right.
Side note.
Yeah.
I'm an independent woman.
But look, we all have...
But either I'll live with my boyfriend or my parents right now. Those are my choices.
Part of being a strong, independent woman is recognizing when you need to ask for help. And sometimes that comes in rent form. So in 1884, the family traveled west. And this is where Katharine sees firsthand the poverty and devastation on the Indian reservations. So the construction of the railroads had ruined their access to bison, which they relied heavily upon for everything from food to clothing to fur for trading. So like shit was fucked up. And I found like a couple of articles and photos about the Native Americans trying to undo the railroads, like as people would as they would lay down whatever, they would come and try to fuck it up and sabotage it.
Wow.
Which I didn't realize how devastating that was to them.
I didn't know either. Yeah.
But it makes sense because it's like going through the west. It's going through. First it's going through the land
like
that was theirs.
Pipeline of
exactly
the 1800s.
Yeah, and then it's like
going. What new fun ways can we fuck up your land that we stole?
Boy, are we creative.
Yeah. Have you been to an Indian reservation before?
No.
I went to one when I did that cross-country bike and build. And, it's like the poverty's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least the one I went to. And it was tough. But the people were super friendly, and they gave us fry bread, which is super delicious. It's just like this fried bread thing.
I like
they
both
put honey
those.
on it. And
that sounds good.
Hella good.
Yeah, that sounds great. So she sees this. She's like very deeply affected by it. A year later, Katharine's dad died unexpectedly, which was like very heartbreaking for the family. But he left his estate to his daughters after 10% was taken out and distributed to various charities. So like a literal tithe. And after the money was taken out, after the 10% was taken out, $14 million was left, which is about $340 million in today's money.
Oh, so just like a little bit.
Yeah, it was the largest. His estate was the largest ever filed in Philadelphia at that point.
Man, I get that. I bet that guy outside with that loud motorcycle has a huge penis
and a huge estate. But this was also this was when coal was, this is when like Pennsylvania industry was booming. So for him to have the largest is like,
that's
holy
crazy.
shit.
Damn. So she's pretty set up at this point.
She's set up because the way that his estate was distributed was that it would go, I didn't realize this, but like women could inherit stuff back then. And I think in my mind, I was like, there's no way, like it must go down to like the next male,
I think
whatever.
only if it was indicated as such, right?
Right. It didn't automatically go to them.
Right.
But so in his will, it was split between the three of them, between the three sisters, and then their offspring would automatically get it.
Cool.
Whether it was like male or
female. I wonder how it worked, like if he hadn't had a will, but he had 3 daughters, where the money would go.
Yeah, I don't know.
To one of their husbands or something?
Or to his brother if he was still alive.
Oh, maybe,
or maybe something like that. Or maybe it just goes to the state. I don't really know. I could have looked that up, but I didn't. So then Katharine all of a sudden has all of these suitors who want to marry her because she has all this money. But she says, fuck them, goes and has a meeting with the Pope and tells him that she needs him to send some missionaries to come and serve the Native Americans and African Americans in the U.S.
Wow.
And the Pope was like, why don't you become a missionary? And I guess when the Pope tells you that you'd make a good nun, it's hard to like turn that down.
Yeah.
So Katharine became a nun. She took a vow of poverty and formed her own order.
She took a vow of poverty against that much money? Mm-hmm. That is dumb as hell.
Well, she ends up...
Look, you can still do well and have some nice brie cheese or something. Damn, dude.
But instead, look.
So
she doesn't give up her estate. She just doesn't use it for herself.
Oh, okay.
Which is like really cool. So for the next 40 years, Katharine traveled the United States, opening and maintaining schools for the most underserved, specifically targeting people who weren't white.
So was she able, could she use all that money? Mm-hmm. Okay, so
she could use it however she wanted.
Okay. But so that's like if you take a vow of poverty, but you have a bunch of money, as long as you give that money away, that still counts?
Yeah, the vow of poverty, I think, means...
It's just for personal.
Right. It means like you don't live lavishly. You only buy what you need.
Life, yeah.
And all of the rest of the money went to these charitable schools and stuff and missions.
Sometimes I need face masks, So I'm living a vow of poverty too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's really cool. So she built all these schools.
So
nice.
So she opened nearly 100 schools, including Xavier University in New Orleans. That was her. And
Heard of it.
Yeah, Xavier University is also the only Catholic historically black college.
Oh, I didn't know that was an HBU.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it is, and it's and she founded it, which is so cool. She came under fire from the KKK because, of course,
yes.
Good thing everything's changed. Somebody burned down one of her schools in Pennsylvania, and according to one story, the KKK tried to... Okay, this story is it's like all hearsay. It's a nice story. I want to believe it, but it's also it's a little too
verified.
It's just a little too Jesus-y for me.
Yeah.
But whatever. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. The KKK tried to come after one of her schools in Texas, where
a super hot shirtless man with long hair turned water into wine and made her come. Is that the end of it?
It's not that Jesus-y.
Sorry, that's predicting the end.
Okay. It's a good prediction. No, they threatened to bomb the church and to tar and feather the pastor at the school. So the nuns prayed, and a few days later, a tornado ripped through the town and destroyed the KKK headquarters and killed 2 of their members.
Wow.
Which is a really nice story.
Black magic.
Literal black magic. I do kind of wonder though, the story, I wonder who else was killed in that tornado.
I think it's just really important that we recognize that there's a church across the street that would disagree with how Jesus
and immediately started playing music as soon as I told that story.
Ooh,
so maybe there's something
nothing's real. I don't believe anything.
But after that, the KKK left her alone because they were freaked out. Yeah. Which good, that's
the approach. Good. You gotta do some crazy stuff to get men to leave you alone. You gotta walk down the street singing to yourself, acting crazy. No one wants to deal with that. At night, if you're worried, just be just start screaming and shaking.
Yeah, make a funny face.
Make a funny face. Just be and then talk about eating dicks or something. Mm-hmm. And then no one's gonna want to deal with that. That's my little tip for all you listeners.
Do you ever see that 30 Rock episode where Liz figures out how to get people on the subway to give her a spot by basically dressing like a homeless person and smelling really badly, so she'll sit somebody will give her a seat and she growls at people who come near her.
I don't remember that explicitly, but that's very funny.
It's a good episode. Okay, so that's happening in 1935. Katharine had a heart attack and could no longer travel to her various schools. So instead, working from home, she started a letter writing campaign to FDR regarding the exploitation of black workers, and used her great amounts of money to contribute to the NAACP, who were taking on these cases about black workers, which is, what an ally. She died in 1955, having used $12 million of her inheritance on charity and missionary work.
Wow.
Her order had 500 members, 51 convents, and had established 49 elementary schools, 12 high schools, and Xavier University.
Wow.
And then in 2000, she was canonized by Pope John Paul II, becoming the second U.S.-born saint. And
do you know who the first is?
I forget who it was.
It's okay.
I looked it
probably
up, but I
wouldn't know
can't
who it was
remember.
anyway. That's cool, though.
And so she's the second U.S.-born saint, but the first U.S. citizen to become a saint. And her saint, she's the patron saint of racial justice and philanthropy, which is really nice. And that's Katharine Drexel.
Cool. That was a good one.
My sources, real quick: Digital Public Library of America, Britannica, American Catholic Studies, Arizona Daily Star, and Church Pop, which I do not recommend.
Hell yeah. Church Pop.
Church Pop was like the worst written article I've ever.
Church Pop.
Sorry, Church Pop. It's how I found out about her, but it's like
because you check Church Pop every day.
Well, Julie actually sent it to me because I guess I don't know why, but it's
because Julie checks Church Pop.
Julie checks Church Pop, but it was one of these it's like, hey guys, I know we're Christian, but we've got some cool people. Check this one out.
Great.
It's like that.
It's also like she's Catholic, which is like a different thing. I feel like the members of Church Pop wouldn't like Catholics.
It sounds like what the Jonas Brothers should have been named.
Church Pop. Yeah, that's true. That is the truth. Well, that was a great one. My person this week is Joan Trumpauer Mulholland.
Whoa.
Yes. Very
what a
big
name.
She was born in 1941. Her great-grandparents were Georgia slave owners, and after the war, they became very poor, and so they became like sharecroppers and chicken thieves, apparently. Her mother moved
Chicken thieves?
Yeah, that's what it said. Look, this is mostly based on a documentary that was made by her son called An Ordinary Hero, which is available if you have a Amazon Prime thing. You can watch it for free. So you could just watch it and not listen to this, but this will be shorter. It's mostly based on that. So she, so her great-grandparents were Georgia slave owners. And then, after the war, like, they just became super poor and, like, became chicken thieves. I don't know. They said that in the movie.
The white working middle class.
Yes.
Lower
class, yeah. So her mother moved to D.C. and married a Yankee.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. Very difficult.
Shortstop or pitcher? Or what are we talking?
Just a regular man, not from the South, from above the Mason-Dixon line. And she, like, always described herself as a Southern... I mean, even though she grew up in the D.C. area, she would go, down to Georgia all the time to see her family. And she just took pride in her Southern heritage, which is interesting because... as you'll see in the future, she's not like the people now who take pride in their Southern heritage.
Whatever do you mean?
So she describes her mother as sort of a stereotypical Georgia redneck with, who upheld ideals of white supremacy. And her father was from Iowa. So he was like slightly less racist, but still didn't love the concept of black people.
Being equal.
So at one point, At one point, her mother becomes ill, like when she's younger, and she's raised for the first couple of months of her life by a black woman, which her mother really didn't like. Her mother was a strong segregationist, as she called it. So it was mostly like this, this idea that like separate but equal is true, and that's how things are happening, and it's just not natural for people to integrate.
And real quick, where is her statue?
She's still alive, so she doesn't have a statue.
No, I meant her mom.
Oh, her mom's statue. Yeah. Anyway.
I was being facetious.
Oh, I know. So she sort of like accepted segregation growing up. It was just like part of her life whenever she would visit her grandparents and, around like the Virginia area and stuff like that. But she distinctly remembers this one summer as a child visiting her grandparents in Georgia, and she this little girl that she would play with down the road, this other little white girl, they kind of like dared each other to go on the other side of the tracks and walk through the black neighborhood, which they called N-word town.
Great.
I'm gonna say it.
Good call.
And as she walked, thank you. What if I was just like,
nope, I think you made the correct editing choices.
Thank you so much. But yeah, but so like so these two little white girls walk through the black area of this little town in Georgia, and all the black people, like if they're outside like hanging up laundry or outside just like sitting on their porch, they go inside immediately. Like they put their eyes down and they like walk inside and like walk to the back of their house. Like they like know that they don't want to be in trouble or be anywhere near these white girls, because like if anything goes wrong, they'll be blamed.
Right.
And just seeing like the fear in these like grown people's eyes, like because of their presence, made her like really stuck with her and made her realize that like this doesn't make sense. And similar to actually Katharine Drexel, you know, she was a church going girl. Was always very religious, and she would go to Sunday school and sing like Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, be they yellow, black, or white, they are precious in his sight, you know. And she took that very literally, as it should be. It's like that's pretty much what it says. It's weird how you say that, but so she like
as far as the things that are like in the Bible or whatever to take literally, that's one of the ones,
right? And like do unto others and all that shit. So it's like there were just like these moments throughout her childhood where she felt dissonance with her surroundings and like what she was told is correct, and she would like be like, this doesn't make sense with like what Jesus would have wanted and all this. So she loved being a Southerner, but she also sort of recognized what that meant in the 1950s and sort of thought like, how can she change this? So she started questioning her mother as a child about like the way things were, and that sort of divided them. She ended up having like a very divisive relationship with her family, especially her mother, because she goes on to become like a pretty important civil rights activist.
What a good way to rebel.
Yeah, for sure. So in 1957,
I just got my nose pierced.
I know. You still have it.
Me too.
I know. I don't know that I ever really did rebel. I did become a cheerleader, which was like my mom's worst nightmare. But I was a cheerleader at like the nerdiest high school. So
I didn't know you were a cheerleader.
Yeah, I have a new bit about it. You haven't seen me do stand-up in a while.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I was a cheerleader.
Do you remember any of your cheers?
I mean, probably if I thought about it for a second. Okay. None of them are coming to me now.
Okay, maybe we'll do like, that'll be one of our bonus content things.
Me doing a video of me doing cheers. Yep. I was never very good at it. I was pretty bad at it. We did like some hip hop dancing, which I kind of liked, but I was never very like athletic or flexible, so I couldn't, or tiny, like, so I was always there's like when you do cheerleading lifts, you know, there's like two bases. There's the flyer and then there's the back spot, and I was always the back spot, which just meant that I would like support them going up and then catch them. I was like the human net. That was my position as a cheerleader. Anyway, so in 1957 in Little Rock, Arkansas, Brown v. Board of Education goes into place, and there's like National Guard brought in to protect, you know, these children. And that, for something in her at this point, you know, 1957, she would have been 16, and that's really when she's like, this is crazy. Like, why do we need people? Like, these are people, you know, and she just really like vowed to kind of dedicate herself to stop segregation. She wanted to go to this small church school in Ohio, but her mother didn't want her to go there, probably because it wasn't segregated. And she would be like, you know, theoretically she worried it would like bring her deeper into the Yankee perspective, when in reality, like, obviously that was a train that was not going to be stopped. So she goes to Duke, which is what her mom wanted her to do.
Can't spell Duke without the UK.
There you go.
Sorry.
What's that?
University of Kentucky and Duke have a very intense basketball rivalry, and we would always say like, you can't spell Duke without UK. Right. Which doesn't really make sense, because then you're like, yeah, we're as good as you plus a couple extra letters. But
I really thought there was some British connotation.
People think that a lot, and I totally get it. But growing up, it was always like, I didn't know UK was a British thing until much later.
It's weird. Like, regional things you have from childhood are so strange. Like, I didn't realize that Poland spring water was regional until in high school. I went well, in high school, I went on this trip called the Irish Way, which is like a not free birthright for Irish people. And I went with all these people, and I met these like 2 Irish people from Texas. They were really cool. And well, the first funny thing was when we were in the airport, we left from JFK or some airport in New York, probably JFK, and there was like a smoking section, and we went over there, and then there was like Hasidic Jews davening, and they were like, "What are those people doing? Like, who are they?" I was like, "You've never seen a Hasidic Jew before? They were from Austin, like they weren't even from crazy Texas." And that was crazy. But then I went to go visit them in Austin in high school, and that was the first time I ever saw Ozarka water. It was pretty. Okay, this is a horrible story.
No, that's good. Well, that's when I first moved to New York, and I got off at the wrong subway stop once, and I ended up in like a very Hasidic neighborhood, and I had never really, like, I had seen them before, but
really?
Yeah, but I didn't. I mean, I had seen them when I came to visit New York when I was 10, you know, but I had never had any experience. I didn't know about their thoughts or anything like that, and so at first I was, and this is 3 years ago. At first I was so excited, and I was like, oh my god, like I've never been around so many Jews before, like my people. Kind of Jew. And then I was like, oh no, these are not my people.
This is a different level.
They do not like that I'm here.
No, it's
wearing
a different level.
Short
they would
dress
like to, they would like to change you.
Yeah,
they would like to change you. So. That's really funny. But anyway, so she goes to Duke, and her freshman year, like, I guess Durham is one of the first places in the country that had sit-ins against segregation, like with regards to lunch counters and stuff like that. So the February of her freshman year is when the sit-in starts, and by the spring she was deeply involved. People, they thought she was oh wait, I was gonna get this quote.
Was it on my computer?
It might have. It was, yeah. Here,
let me see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Real quick, I will say this while I'm looking for it. This story reminds me of when we were at the Women's March and the. Here it is.
Oh, great! You still have it.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. What were you saying about the Women's March?
Oh, it reminds me. You remember that family that was standing behind us in line from North Carolina?
Yes, exactly.
And there was so when we were real quick, just to like set it up, when we went to the Women's March. We were waiting in line for the metro, and it was like a 3-hour line, but it was the most beautiful line I've ever been in.
Although looking back on it, I think there were like a lot of people just skipping the line. Like there was like a lot of ways to get around it, but I think we had a
really good time. Anyway, there was a group of us that went, and there was this family behind us. It was all women, and it was like the grandmother, the mother, her 3 daughters, and like her daughter's friend. But the grandmother was like, we just started talking to them or whatever, because it's like, how else are you going to pass this time? And it was really nice, and there was a beautiful spirit about the whole thing. That still makes me want to cry. But the grandmother was talking about growing up in North Carolina.
She was like a real Southern lady.
She's very, very Southern. And in her very Southern accent was like, I had 6 brothers and sisters, and they were all racist.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't know why I turned out different. I just knew it was wrong.
Right. Yeah. Like yes. And then it's exactly like that woman. And here we go. Here we go. Oh. Okay.
Little dance break.
Dance break to celebrate the liberal Southern woman. There's nothing better, because you get the charm of a Southern woman, but also like the sanity of a Northern woman.
Wow, Molly. Really? The sanity of a Northern woman?
Sorry, I think racists are insane.
I think racists are in the North too.
I think that's true, but also there's something shocking about someone with that deep of a Southern accent who's very that progressive. She literally, like, I tried to do a bit about this afterwards. Maybe I should try it again, because it kind of worked. But she literally, like, her granddaughter was like, I'm the only bi person in my 5th grade class. And I was like, ugh. And then the grandmother was like, my granddaughter's just the coolest girl.
And then do you remember what the mom said? The mom was like, sweetie, everybody's a little bi.
Oh. That family was the shit.
They were great. Here's your quote, though.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So basically, she gets involved with these sit-ins.
Joan.
Yeah. Joan does, yes, to get back to it. And the people, like the higher ups, thought she was insane. The police would literally, like, they thought she was mentally ill. The fact that a white woman would be involved in this. After her first arrest, they insisted that she called her parents and the Duke administration to tell them what was going on and like have them try and convince. And this is This is a quote from one of the times she was arrested. The prison's superintendent sent a letter to Joan's parents saying...
The prison superintendent?
Yes, the prison superintendent sent a letter to Joan's parents saying, "What I cannot understand is why as a mother, you permitted a minor white girl to gang up with a bunch of Negro bucks and white hoodlums to rumble over this country with the express purpose of violating the laws of certain states and attempting to incite acts of violence."
Because the laws of certain states are wrong and fucked up, you piece of shit.
Yeah, and I think that's from one of her later arrests, like when she was like, you know, on the freedom rides and all that stuff. But anyway, that was the perspective, like from the jump. Like people, white people in authority were like, "What is wrong with you? Like, you're crazy."
Why would a sweet little white girl want to fight for justice?
Exactly. They were like, "You're totally nuts." But she like kept insisting like she believed it followed Christian values and Christianity and went and like these, you know, segregation went against everything that she believed in. And you know, people would say like that expression, like she says, is the only thing worse than an N is an N lover. So people would say that to her all the time and like that kind of thing. So anyway, she knew like going into this, she had to make the conscious choice that she would be sort of pulling herself away from her family and that she would never really be welcome there. And she describes the movement as a family. She also says that like a lot of African American members of the movement sort of had to distance themselves from sorry, my mom's calling. Had to distance themselves from their hometowns because like it was so since they were such active members of the civil rights movement, if they went back to their small hometowns, it could be dangerous for them and their families. So a lot of them, she talks about how like people couldn't, like a lot of people in the movement couldn't look back, like as soon as they kept going forward. And she said this, this is a quote, "That's what helped some of us white Southerners keep on keeping on. We had no place to go back to." And so then she talks about that. So just that thing of like, there's nowhere else to be. Like we have to keep going. So she drops out of school at some point. The Duke administration is like,
come back whenever.
Yeah, the dean. No. The dean of women at Duke pressured her to stop, so she just drops out and joins the movement full time. She moves near Howard in Northern Virginia and gets involved in the student movement group Nonviolent Action Group, or NAG, and their slogan was that they were just going to nag the country into submission. And that's when the lunch counter sit-ins started in the Virginia area. So that was like a little bit easier. I mean, they weren't great, but you know, they get way more violent when she gets into the deep, deep South. But so these Virginia lunch sit-ins, white people were just saying she basically, like when she talks about it in the documentary, she's like, I don't know exactly what they were saying, but people were always saying the same, some version of like, black people are inferior and diseased and like blah, blah, blah. She was like, some version of that, you know?
Yeah.
There was like white kids as young as 14, which we know where they are now, with Nazi armbands. And it's like, this is like not long after World War II, and they already like had Nazi armbands. It's so nuts to me. Like, it seems nuts now when these like alt-right, quote unquote, people have Nazi armbands and stuff, but like a few years after World War II, like how is this acceptable? It's like this is a clear enemy that was just defeated by the United States. Like, it's so nuts. And this was another interesting thing I learned from the documentary. There were other civil rights leaders who were interviewed, and one of them at one point later, which I'll touch on this, when they go to the funeral for the 4 little girls who died in that bombing of the church, the KKK bombed, they went to the funeral of it, and there were like snipers there was like people on the roof with like Confederate flags and stuff, and an African American civil rights leader was saying that she was holding I forget her name unfortunately, but she was holding a American flag, and she said like, she was like, and the South, like white South didn't love the American flag until recently,
right? Which
I didn't realize that like the white, like now you think of like truck nuts with the American flag on it, but really it's like was the Confederate flag for a long time.
Yep.
Anyway, so the police like led them out of their first sit-in, and it was like the police were cooperative in Northern Virginia to a degree with them.
Do you think that's because like it involved a lot of white people?
That's a good question. I don't think it involved that many white people, because the point of it is that the black people would sit in with the white people, but I think there were a few. I think there were equal numbers of white people in the one. As far as I understand, there was like a few white people in the ones in the South, but the reaction that the white Southerners had to white people who would sit with the black people at the counters was like even more rage.
Right.
Whereas I think in the North it was like sort of protective, but I don't know. But they let the African American people out too.
I just think about that.
The police just like kept the peace, which is what they're fucking supposed to do.
Well, I think about that with like the Tina Fey thing where she was like, on SNL, the thing of like stay home and like, you know, don't risk, and like, I don't know.
No, that's wrong. I mean, that's just
well,
not
it's
the
wrong,
right,
but a big part of why it's wrong is that when white people show up to these protests, it keeps everybody else safer because police are less likely to shoot us.
Yeah, I saw someone's tweet that was like, if you're a white person and you want to go to a rally, dress like you're going to a job interview, like dress super well, because it's like that even more than a regular looking white person, a white person who's like dressed, like put together, like that's like the police aren't going to fuck with that.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like,
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's like, yeah, if you're dressed like a fucking hippie or whatever, they're like, well, he was Antifa, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Dress like you're right. Like white people with like a nice outfit on, like they're gonna, you know.
Yeah, it's like,
they're less likely to do something.
It's like we have privilege. Use it for the best possible thing.
Yeah.
Which is like going to those. Okay,
I agree. No, I totally agree.
Side note.
I totally agree. So then after these like few lunch protests in Northern Virginia, a few weeks later, the counters are desegregated. So that was like a relatively easy fight compared to what they were going to get themselves into later. They decided to move over to Glen Echo Park, Maryland, to desegregate the pools and rides. It was like this sort of little amusement park. And she decides to start by desegregating the carousel because, as she says, quote, there isn't a back of there's a back of a bus, there's a back of whatever, but there's no back of the carousel. So they do that. Then the Freedom Rides sort of start. And the Freedom Rides were this interstate travel. Basically, like the plan was to like get a bunch of like mixed race young people on a bus, not mixed race people, but blacks and white young people on a bus, and ride from more northern states throughout the South. Just basically that was it. Just be like interstate travel. That was I mean, it's so crazy how like was totally revolutionary because it was, but it's literally they were just riding in a bus throughout the South. Together. And so initially that was sort of viewed within the civil rights movement as a bad idea. People thought it was kind of lazy. They thought it wasn't really like putting the work in, you know? And so initially it was 13 riders on 2 buses through the South, and they were attacked a few times, like in, like really badly in South Carolina. And that's when people realized that it was really the next move. Wait, I feel like there's where did I put this information? There's one basically there was like, yeah, this is it. So in 1961, the first Freedom Ride, this is what it was, in Anniston, Alabama. They're attacked a few times throughout their drive, but like nothing too horrible. Then they get to Anniston, Alabama, and their bus is firebombed. So there was a video of someone who was on the bus who an African-American civil rights leader who was saying that when they drove into the town, there were all these like jokes about this place and how like horrible it was. And when they drove into the town,
we're like Anus Town.
Yeah, exactly. When they drove into the town, they realized that there was like nobody in the streets, like, which felt like super
so
spooky.
Eerie.
Yeah, because they were hiding people because they were about to explode a bus. So they firebombed the bus, and then as they were running out to escape, people were beating them with bats. It was like really, really horrible. So that was when she, and eventually the police stepped in, but it took them a long time.
Yeah, of course, because the police
were part of it.
Yeah.
So that's when that's when the movement was kind of like, oh shit, I think this is really the next wave. And that's when Joan decided to get involved in the Freedom Rides. So the one that she went on was a little bit different. Most of them would just leave from the north. Hers, she flew from DC to New Orleans and then took the train to Jackson. So it kind of integrated 2 elements and integrated like, because in the train station, the waiting rooms were segregated. So when they got to Jackson, her and a black friend sat in the same waiting room, and they were arrested there. They were put in a segregated jail, and there were a few other white women, or white girls rather, young women that were there from the North. And Joan would say that she felt like way more, and those white women from the North, as I just was, were like super anti-South. Like they were like, had a little bit more money. They were like, oh, this is so horrible what the South is doing, blah, blah, blah. And so Joan felt like way more connected to the poor African-American Southern women, because that's sort of, she grew up with like a pretty poor Southern background. And so that's really where she felt comfortable, She felt like she had more in common with those women than with the women that she was segregated in this cell with. They like kept a diary of like what was happening hidden in the hem of her skirt so that she could like always remember.
That's some Holocaust shit.
Yeah, exactly. So after 2 weeks, they're just like picked up and sent off. They don't know where they're going. They like drive through the night. They feel like the bus is slowing down in rural parts. They get terrified. It turns out they're going to Parchman Prison, which is like this notoriously violent prison in Mississippi. The men had it worse. These guards, someone described it as like the guards at this prison were the lowest rung of white society. Like they were super poor white people, but in the prison they were kings. They could, he was saying like they could beat as many black people as they wanted. The
only place where they had power.
Exactly. So they used it. And they decided, so they had so many Freedom Rider student prisoners that they cleared out death row and they put them all on death row. Not literally like they weren't going to kill them, but they were in the death row cells. Like they were like 50 feet from the electric chair.
How did they clear out death row?
I don't really know. That's just what it said. They must have just put them somewhere else, but they like made like they needed maybe they didn't have that many people or something. Maybe that was just like the best area they could find. I don't know.
Or the most intimidating.
Or they killed people right away.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but they did, and then that's where they all stayed. So they're there for 2 months, and there's 4 people in a cell that they go in the documentary. On the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Rides, they go to the prison and they like look around it so you can see how small the cell is. If you watch the documentary, An Ordinary Hero is what it's called again. And it's crazy. It's like the size of my kitchen, like for you, Ariel, to see. It's like a very small, and there would be 4 people in there.
Jeez.
So
like certainly not big enough to lie down. Like for 4 people to lie down.
No, yeah,
you'd have to
I don't
take
know.
turns
They had
sleeping.
bunk beds. They had she said that they like in the video in the movie they had like just one bed in there, but at the time she said they had bunk beds and they would put one mattress underneath the bottom bunk and pull it out.
Jeez.
So it was like 3 to 4 people, and so she becomes the first, and so they're there for 2 months. Finally, she gets out. She, I think she ends up staying like a little bit longer because she stays like an extra month because each day she stays after, she gets $3 off of her fine. So she decided to stay longer, which doesn't really seem to make sense because they spend more money if you're in there, but I don't know.
Oh, are you saying the criminal justice system is
Doesn't
a
make
little
sense.
illogical and flawed?
Yeah, exactly. So around the time that she gets out of there, Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes are the first African-American young people to enroll in the University of Virginia. And that inspires her to enroll in a historically black college. She feels like integration should go both ways. So she enrolls at Tougaloo Southern Christian College in Mississippi. And this is really a segregationist's worst nightmare is Joan, because she is a white Southern woman. She's a woman who, like, this system of white supremacy has always been said to protect, right? Like, she's like the excuse. White Southern women are like, and sometimes these white Southern women would, a lot of the time, these white Southern women would play into that and be like, I'm like, I just need protection or whatever. And she was like, right. And so she was like, no, like, I reject this. I don't need this. And in fact, I think it's wrong, And so that was really turned things on its head. She described Tougaloo as the only place where they really felt free in Mississippi. And at first there was all this like controversy about them accepting her, but by the end they decided that like the college claimed that their charter was older than Jim Crow laws, so that
they
became like the rule of the land. So they were allowed to take her.
How did the other students feel about that?
I think they felt good.
Okay.
I mean, this is from her son's perspective, so
right.
I don't know. But it seemed like at that point it seems like she was like pretty integrated into the movement. I mean, I guess I didn't find, when I was just like lightly searching her, I didn't find something that said that like she wasn't really accepted by the African American community, and like there probably were people who felt like stay in your lane, but
or just like, we finally have a place for us. Like, why do you feel the need to come here?
Maybe, although I do feel like the place, it's not like they always had places for them because they had to. It was like, it's not like,
but like an institutionalized place.
Right, but there's a lot of like it was forced. It was
sure.
Forced to be
you're
a
right.
space
You're
for
right.
them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like
because there used to not be the
all
option.
Institutions were only for them.
You're right.
Like there wasn't a choice, so it wasn't necessarily a good thing.
I gotcha.
So I don't know. I think it was okay. She, so let's see. She joins Tuglu and becomes a member of Delta Sigma Theta, which she was like, I think it's a black sorority. She's one of the very few white people to have ever been a member, if the only, I forget, but very rare. She said this thing about outside some of the housing that was like right along the road, they had metal plates on the housing, the college dorms, to protect from bullets.
Jesus.
There were like sometimes crosses were burned in their yard. She met Martin Luther King there and received many hate letters. One of the hate letters said, quote unquote, "Jews and communists are behind this Negro business."
Oh, I have the same reply on Twitter from somebody.
Oh, really?
That's crazy.
There you go. And she got some love mail too. There was like one letter she read from like a lady from California who was like, "You're great." So her parents like kind of entice her with this trip to Europe for the summer, where they hope that she will give up fighting for people's rights. So she goes on the trip, but she obviously comes back to school. And that is when she gets back is when the Jackson, Mississippi Woolworth sit-in happens, which is probably the most famous and the most violent sit-in situation, or at least one of them. So basically, there are three black people sitting at the counter at the Jackson Woolworth lunch counter. Mm-hmm. Perlina Lewis, Memphis Norman, and Ann Moody. And she's just supposed to be like a spotter. Like she's not even supposed to be Joan. Yeah. Okay. Joan is not even supposed to be like in the restaurant, mm-hmm. but she's just supposed to be a spotter for the protest that's down the block. But that picket line gets arrested faster than they think, so she's kind of just floating around with nothing to do. So she decides to go over to Woolworths and just see what's going on over there. So she walks over, and she walks in to see a thug, this former cop, this white guy, kicking Memphis.
I like that you used the word thug.
Yeah, I know. They kept using that in the documentary. I thought that was good. Mm-hmm. This thug. But luckily, he was like the good news was that he was only wearing sneakers, because if he had been wearing hard shoes, like this guy, the African-American guy who was at the counter, Memphis, would have been much more hurt. He was still bleeding from the head, but it could have been a lot worse. So, an undercover cop arrests them both.
Sure.
Right.
Of course.
And takes them outside. And then the two women are pulled from their stools, but they rush back to the counter. She sees a man with a knife, and she yells to them. She like yells out their name. I think she says like, "Annie, like watch out, mm-hmm. that guy's a knife." And then that suddenly draws the attention to her, because they're like, "Oh, this white woman knows them by name. Like, what's happening?" So she at that point, she just walks through the crowd and sits down with them. She's the first white person to be sitting with them at this time, because before that, it was just the three of them sitting at the whites only counter. Yeah. Right? Or, well, now two of them, because Memphis is gone. Right. So then the crowd becomes very incensed. They're yelling and cursing, like saying dirty jokes and everything.
Dirty jokes.
Just fun dirty jokes. Oh, yeah.
It's not the time, guys. This is not open mic night.
Right. You just don't get the comedy. We don't get it.
It was just a joke.
It was just a joke. So this one guy drags Joan and Annie out of the store, and because because he's dragging Joan, they get out of the store, and the police just see a white guy dragging a white woman, and they're like, what the fuck? So they and Annie had kind of like sort of hid or something, so they just arrest the guy, and then Joan and Annie go back into the counter. But because he was if he had been dragging Annie, he would have arrested them both.
Right.
But he just was dragging Joan at that point, so the police officer just arrests the man. So they go back in, which now in retrospect, I mean, I think it was all happening very quickly, but they should have just had her keep getting beat up. And then maybe everyone would have been arrested. So this white guy joins them at the counter. One of the members of the movement, this man named Salter, I think I wrote.
Was it I mean, I guess like none of it was planned where Joan was going to join them, but like this white guy who comes.
I don't think it was planned either. He's in the video too, and he like wearing like a real Southwestern shirt. That guy, he got a cool look. But I don't think that was planned either. I think
was he part of the movement, or he just happened to be there? Okay.
No. He was part of the movement. He was definitely part of the movement, but I don't think that he was. I think he just felt like he should go.
Yeah, it just becomes like...
Yeah, it was all kind of... I think it all happened really quickly. So he decides to sit down, but that really... As I said earlier, for some reason, a white man's involvement in this incensed the like thugs there.
Right, because you're seen as like a traitor.
Yeah, to like a crazy point. So that's when it starts to get super violent. Someone with brass knuckles like knocks him in the head. What? They put out cigarettes on his neck.
Who brings their brass knuckles to the diner?
Well, if you're going to protest a sit-in.
But if you weren't... okay.
Sorry. I think they knew. I think maybe
they knew
like,
it was going to happen.
Went together. I mean, it's a small town. They probably should be like, I'm going to go home, get my brass knuckles. I'm going to come back. I'm going to punch you people in the face.
Good accent.
Thank you so much. They threw pepper and water in his eyes. And the whole time he just kept chain smoking Pall Malls, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The police outside like aren't doing anything about it. They're like, it's your business, you started it. And she like didn't think they'd make it out of there alive. She described it as a real out of body experience. They were there from like noon to 2:30. That was the time that Hull had. So the FBI and other undercover cops did nothing. There were FBI there and undercover cops. They weren't doing anything. Finally, the president of Tougaloo finds out like, here's what's happening. Comes over, tries to get the cops involved, tries to get the manager to shut it down. Neither of them will do anything. Finally, he calls the Woolsworth's national like line on the telephone and gets them to tell the manager to shut the store down. So he like turns all the lights off and like everyone leaves. And this was really the beginning of the African American community in Jackson rising up to support the movement. It was really like a big turning point. For them. So that was the Woolworth counter one. Then Medgar Evers, the head of the NAACP, is shot. She knew him, and that's really terrifying. She was on the KKK's most wanted list.
Cool.
Which is pretty cool. She says,
I mean, terrifying, but like good.
Well, she says that they had later on, they found out from like a KKK informant that they had like a wall of like most wanted, and if they killed someone, they would X them out. It's like, Medgar Evers' face was X'd out, but like hers never was. She helped organize the March on Washington. She like didn't get to do the actual march part. She was working in like a press tent, but she went and saw the speeches. And then she was there in 1953 when the 4 little girls were killed by a KKK bomb at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. She like carries a piece of the glass from that church in her wallet with her.
Did you ever read that book about? It was like a children's book.
I don't think
about
I did.
that. Not children's, but it was for young adults.
I saw the documentary. Isn't it Spike Lee that made that?
Maybe.
I saw the Spike Lee documentary. It's really good.
I just remember in 5th or 6th grade, we read that book. It's like, it's a chapter book.
Right.
And it's the whole thing is like from the perspective of one of the little girls who dies.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't, our teachers didn't tell us what it was about going in.
Wow.
And so the ending where they all die was very traumatic. but also I still remember it. So
I guess it worked.
But it was, it's
that's intense.
I wish I could remember.
Not as traumatic as being killed on.
Right. Totally. And I wish I could remember what the book was called.
We can look it up after. We'll post it.
Okay.
That's I thought when you said from the perspective of one of the girls, I thought you meant like after she had already died or something. No,
it was like,
oh, cool.
But it was like her life leading up to it.
Oh,
and then she goes to church.
That's horrible. That's really this.
Kudos to whichever teacher made me read that, though.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good book. She talks about the impact that had. Well, it kind of reminds me of Sandy Hook in a way, like, because it's like, well, she talks about this where she's like, okay, of course, it was so tragic when someone like Medgar Evers is shot in his front yard, but you know that deaths like that are going to happen. Like, you know that adults that put themselves in the line, like in this work, like something bad could happen to them. That's tragic, but not shocking. Right. Whereas the deaths of these 4 girls felt so like as something that no one could, and to bomb like a place of worship,
right,
and kill 4 little girls, it just felt like so much. It just felt so shocking, and like they didn't even realize that could happen, you know. So yeah, in that way it reminds me of Sandy Hook, because it's like, well, if that's not going to stop gun rights people, then nothing will. Anyway, so she carries a piece of the glass like in her wallet just to like always remember. And she was, outside the funeral that day. There was like only family were allowed in the church. MLK spoke, and she was like outside with crowds of people. Mm-hmm. In 1964 in Canton, Mississippi, there are demonstrations over the right to vote. Lots of violence. So Anne Moody, that woman who was at the counter, advises her not to go, but this car of 3 so it's 3 people who present white. It's Joan in the back seat, and the front seat's this white dude, and then in the front passenger seat is a white dude, and then the driver is actually a Pakistani guy. But he would count as white, apparently. Right. It's like as long as you're not black.
Yeah, well, and it's like even still today on like census forms, they're considered Caucasian. Like if you're from Iraq
really?
Oh. Yeah, it's really interesting, like people from, I think it's like Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan, like there's no on most forms there's
like Middle
no
Eastern or
there's no actual form for that skin tone, and they're officially considered white.
I would think that would be Asian.
I think you can
in Asia.
I guess, but it's also like the Caucasus Mountains, which is literally Caucasian. It's weird, but I think there was what podcast did a thing on it? I can't remember. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's very, because race is a construct and none of this is real.
So anyway, this is a crazy story where they decide to go anyway. The 3 of them decide to go into Canton and just like go to this meeting. So they're driving in the car. They go to this meeting. They drive back, and a car is following them. And the car kind of like follows them onto the interstate, and then like swarms around them and forces them to stop. And then people get out of the car, and the guys like surround their car with no hoods, but they do all have crowbars in hand. And they open the car. They like the dude who was driving recalls the Pakistani dude was like, yeah, I didn't know. I think I just rolled down my window to see what they wanted. Like, he was like somehow like a little the 2 like white people who had been in the movement for a while were like, no. And he was like, oh, okay. And he and they like opened the door from the inside once he. Ooh,
hold on.
Ooh.
1 second.
Once he opens the window, so they open the door, they pull him out, they start beating him over the head, and the 2 white people in the car realize, like, they hear the people surrounding them being like, we should do it tonight, like we should do it, like they're gonna kill them. Basically they're gonna kill them. So recently around that time, an Indian politician had been arrested like on purpose. He like put himself in harm's way in Mississippi because he knew that like they couldn't really do anything to him because he was like a diplomat from another country. So he gets arrested in Mississippi as like a protest action, and then the local police in Mississippi get a call from the State Department, and like that was a huge news. That was like recent news. So all of a sudden they're beating this Pakistani dude up, and one of the white dudes is like, one of the like KKK members is like, wait, is this that Indian dude that was on TV? And the white dude in the car was like, yes. Yep. Was like, yes, this is the Indian dude that was on TV. And then the Pakistani guy was like, I'm not Indian, because like Pakistan had just become free from India, and he like was not getting it. And so the white dude's like, to be fair,
he had just been hit over the head.
Indian. You're Indian. You're the Indian guy on TV. And he's like he was like so offended. He was like, I am not Indian. I am Pakistani. Then he goes, I'm from Lahore, Pakistan. And one of the KKK members goes, what's Lahore, Pakistan? And the white guy goes, the biggest city in India.
When your ignorance gets in the way of your ignorance.
Yeah. So, and then he was like, the government won't let you kill a foreigner, like blah, blah, blah. Because they knew that the government would let them kill them. Mm-hmm. So they decide to let them go finally, and they just like drive back. Actually, this was kind of crazy. The white dude says to his friend, like, can you make one stop? So they go to the governor's mansion.
I just gotta get cigarettes real quick. This was stressful.
It was stressful. They go to the governor's mansion because the governor had made Mississippi had made a statement that was like, there is no violence. If you see violence, like, let me know, but there's no violence. And so he drags his friend who's bleeding from the head. He drags blood along the marble steps of the governor's mansion, knocks on the door, and is like, is the governor here? And then when they figure out who it is, they obviously slam the door, and then they take him to the hospital. But that was pretty cool, I thought. And then but then the really like the horrible thing and the reason like why they really were super close to death is a few weeks later the KKK hangs 2 white people and a black guy. It does happen to people 3 weeks later. So it was like in the same area. Yeah. Like they were looking to, and they were saying like, we want to stop Freedom Summer. Like that's what they were calling it. They want to stop Freedom Summer. And they knew that by killing white people who were involved in the movement, that would send a strong message to prevent, because they knew that like if white people get involved, that brings more attention to it. Right. And then if white people are scared to be involved, then they won't. Right. So they were really going to kill them. So anyway, and she talked a little bit about like if she feels guilt about that and stuff, but she said she didn't. She just feels like she has to like, work super hard and like keep doing stuff, whatever.
Why would she feel guilt about that? Because it wasn't her?
Because they
like that survivor's guilt?
Yeah. Well, like, because they were like, if they had killed her if they'd killed the people in that car, they wouldn't have killed the other people, and she knew them. Like she knew the people that they killed. So anyway, so she finally she graduates. She gets hired as a low-level clerk at the Smithsonian because, quote, we don't hire women because all they do is get married and have babies and leave.
Who said that?
And quit the Smithsonian when she graduated. And she becomes a teacher's aide in Arlington and raises 5 boys as a single mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was a long one. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I really liked it. Also, mine was short, so this worked out really well.
Worked out good. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I forgot, but I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Say her full name one more time.
Joan Trumpauer Mulholland.
Cool.
Yeah, she's still around. She's a pretty amazing lady.
Awesome.
Well, this was great.
I liked that a lot. Yeah. That was a really good story.
Thank you. Well, I guess you gotta keep making history. Bye.
Bye-bye.